Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast episode number 519 for the 30th of September 2018. Richard Saunders here with you from, let me have a look out the window, a sunny Sydney, Australia. Although last night a small thunderstorm came through. It's quite interesting these days when you hear a bit of thunder. You can run to the internet and look up a map and shows you exactly where the lightning strikes are and the expanding circle around the lightning strike of the thunder. And you can see when the noise passes you by. Well, by the time you've heard it, actually, it's passed you by. But coming up on this week's show, our new reporter Michelle Franklin talks about poaching. No, not eggs. Poaching animals. Poaching endangered animals to harvest them for body parts for pseudo-medicine, alternative medicine. You've heard the sort of thing, rhino horn and the bones of tigers or whatever the case may be. Well, Michelle has an idea, a possible idea, that maybe could help combat this terrible trade. Following that, a news report in the last week about a so-called vaccination expert being used, or maybe being used in a court of law. I think you'll find this report interesting. Now, some weeks ago, Maynard was the host of a event to do with Science Week, organised by Frankie Lee, thank you Frankie, about talking to the animals, or with the animals, or at the animals, or learning about animals from experts. And Maynard interviews some of these animal experts. This is where the science comes in, with the Skeptic Zone, with the science and reason. There's not too much to be skeptical about here, but it is an interesting topic, animal science. Then to round off the show, it's Heidi Robertson, the Raw Skeptic, with a follow-up to the story she presented last week about the vote in the Byron Shire Council, near where she lives, that didn't stop the anti-vaxxers hiring out council facilities. And Heidi will read a report about this written by Jane Hansen. But now it's time for me to run downstairs and have one of my favourite snacks that come around this time of the year to do with Oktoberfest. They call them peanut flips. Well, I munched down a few peanut flips. I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
Life is wild. With Michelle Franklin.
So I'm going to be upfront here and tell you that I don't actually have an answer to this problem. But I have some ideas, and maybe if I share them, you can build on them. When I say poaching, what comes to mind besides eggs? I get an image of a ruthless hunter stalking a rhino and then shooting her dead and removing her horns while her doomed baby watches on. Maybe you think of an endangered tiger species that is killed so that its bones and eyes and various other equally useless body parts can fail to cure anything from malaria to broken arms. Or maybe it's the exhausted leatherback turtle who's done the enormous effort of swimming across the ocean and locating and crawling up some remote beach, only to have her eggs stolen under the assumption that they're somehow going to make someone feel a bit more horny. Honestly, if that's the effect that you're going for, and you want to pointlessly kill an animal to get it, why not rabbits? At least there's some kind of correlation there that you can pretend means something. Pseudomedicinal poaching is a strange and complex practice, and motivations behind it, however socially complex and hard to understand, basically come down to the mistaken belief that some parts of some animals have magical healing properties that just aren't there. But fake medicine isn't the only motivation behind poaching. Some people poach wildlife for meat or for cultural reasons or because they don't have any other options. And the market's there and they need the money. Some people want the animal product because it's a cultural status symbol. And some people just want a photo of themselves standing over some big powerful dead thing so that they can pretend that it somehow proves how powerful and cool they are. Then, of course, there's the form of wildlife poaching that we see in the news from time to time in Australia, where the motivation behind poaching is nothing to do with faulty thinking, and it's just a bunch of wealthy and otherwise law-abiding people who really, really like Australian animals and just want a pet goanna or a black-headed python. So what if the animals that they want are actually really easy to find and catch, and people are willing to pay money for them? What approach should we take if we want to protect these animals? For pseudo-medicinal poaching, there are some fairly straightforward approaches available. You can target the people who are actually doing the hunting, provide them with better options, easier ways to make money, or you can punish them to the point where the punishment outweighs the benefits. Or you can focus on the people who buy the poached products, educate them about the difference between powdered magic horn and actual medicine, and give them access to medicine that will provide the benefits that they're looking for. And by some combination of education, support, punishment, maybe we can actually make some difference in this situation. But what about our native wildlife that's being poached for the pet trade? The price is high, the collecting's easy, and in the unlikely event that you get caught, the punishment's laughable. So what do? We could address the on-ground poachers, try to catch every person who walks through the bush carrying a camera bag and make sure they're not popping lizards in as they go. We could increase the punishments, give people fines that are high enough to make poaching not worth the risk. We could educate the high-rolling wannabe herpetologist with questionable ethics and a really cool snake room about the terrible conditions that animals are kept in and how they get transported through customs and smuggled out of Australia. But then there'll always be another slightly less empathetic customer waiting in line to buy that one gecko or tree frog that survived the 18 hours stuffed down some bloke's undies. I don't know what the answer is here. One thing that I think is true across most industries is that if the market disappears, then the producers will stop producing. So the question I'm asking is, can we stop wildlife poaching by destroying the market for illegal animals by flooding it with legal ones? What if we made it legal and gave trained and capable people permits to take sustainable numbers of animals from the wild, breed them, sell them, export them, and then regulate the industry? Of course, there'll be a financial value here, and the profit would need to be channeled back into the system that monitors and regulates exports. We could bring in strict and enforceable husbandry standards, quarantine periods, and animal welfare obligations. Effective record keeping could reduce crossbreeding and inbreeding and help establish high-quality reservoir populations with improved practices by taking the whole industry out of the black market and making it transparent and respectable and beneficial to the wildlife. And if it's being managed well with regular gene flow from wild populations into the overseas captive populations, maybe the current populations of animals that are being inbred and in some cases poorly kept by well-meaning but naive pet owners, maybe they'll become healthy and genetically useful reservoirs to act as backups for our endangered animals. Would the option of happy, healthy, legal pets motivate people to buy from a registered breeder or importer? And would the availability of legally exported pets bring the price down to the point where the profit made from poaching just wasn't worth the risk of being caught? I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't. Maybe legalising it would just create another avenue for people to funnel illegal wildlife into a legal market where the buyer can be tricked into buying a poached lizard where they otherwise would have chosen not to. And then what if it works and the price of a captive bred red-belly black snake becomes so low that your previously valuable pet is now just another temporary novelty that you release into the wild when you become bored with it? and then the Burmese pythons of the Florida Everglades are joined by invasive populations of tiger snakes and saltwater crocodiles. There's definitely a downside to exotic pets, and as much as I know I would earn everlasting brownie points if I was able to get my daughter a pet toucan, I know it's not a good idea to let every 9-year-old who develops an interest buy an endangered animal from the other side of the planet. I don't know what the answer is here. I feel like it'd be great if we could have captive populations of every endangered species spread across the globe with thousands of people caring for them and breeding them and learning the ins and outs of what they need. But for the most part, professional zoos are already doing this. Is there any benefit to be had from private keepers in other countries having Australian wildlife? And does there need to be? Is the fact that they want it enough to justify allowing them to have it in a way that minimises harm? Especially since they're getting them anyway, so clearly what we're doing now isn't stopping anyone. How best can we minimise harm when there's a lucrative market for our wildlife, some of which exist in ever-diminishing populations? Please keep this question circulating in your mind and spare a bit of time every now and then to think over the value of our wildlife and how best we can work that to their advantage to keep the wild things in the wild places where they belong and out of the wild places where they don't.
Everybody, this is Carrie Poppy from Ono Ross and Carrie. I'm really excited to join you this October for the big convention. I've never been to Australia. I hope it's good. I hope it exists. The flat earthers tell me it might not. But I'm going to be giving a talk about effective outreach and looking at movements from a perspective of how they evolve, the different steps that they take, and how you can outreach to different people depending on the stage that each movement is in. Is it still in its pseudoscience phase? Is it in a more of a spiritualist phase? Is it in a paranormal phase? I think that figuring that out really helps you figure out what the best way is to outreach to each group and each person in that group. So I hope that sounds interesting to you. I think it'll be really fun and informative. I'm basing it on lots of years of hanging out with people with extraordinary beliefs. So I hope I have some good ideas. Hope I'll see you soon. Bye!
Here's a story that comes to us from The Age, theage.com.au, links in this week's show notes, by Kylar Loussikian, published on the 23rd of September 2018. Anti-vaccination activist turns expert witness in family court immunisation brawl. After courting controversy with her PhD claiming an immunisation conspiracy, anti-vaccination campaigner Julie Wileman is now providing her expert opinion in family matters before the courts. The country's most prominent anti-vaccination activist is claiming to be an expert witness in a family legal brawl over whether their children should be immunised. Julie Wileman, a militant vaccination critic, has lodged an expert witness statement in a federal circuit court matter which claims the federal government is suppressing evidence immunisation is ineffective and harmful. Dr. Wileman has provided the statement in support of a mother who does not want her children vaccinated. The father, who does want his children immunised, has drafted in the former director of the National Centre for Immunisation Research, Peter McIntyre, to provide the court with his appraisal of Dr. Wileman's claims. Fairfax Media has chosen not to disclose the details of the family who are party to the dispute heard before the Federal Circuit Court in Brisbane earlier this year. Dr. Wileman, who was controversially awarded a humanities PhD by the University of Wollongong for a thesis which argued the World Health Organization colluded with pharmaceutical companies in a conspiracy to spruik unneeded vaccinations, has no academic qualifications in medicine. The publication of her PhD was criticised by a chorus of medical academics and scientists, including the Executive Dean of Wollongong University's Science, Medicine and Health Faculty, Alison Jones. The government's push to vaccinate all children is, quote, coercion in a medical practice, instead of informed consent, and is contrary to the good medical practice guidelines and all international human rights conventions, end quote, the statement reads. Dr. Wileman's statement makes numerous claims about how medical professionals and the pharmaceutical industry disregard the risks of vaccination. The document, obtained by Fairfax Media, accuses the government of not providing, quote, hard scientific evidence of safety and efficacy of vaccines because it cannot, end quote. Quote, if the father of these children cannot provide this evidence, then fully informed consent has not been provided, and there is no evidence that vaccinating with the full schedule of 16 vaccines will be in the best interest of these children, end quote, the statement reads. Quote, if the mother does not wish to vaccinate, then the default position must be not to vaccinate, end quote. The Office of Health Minister Greg Hunt declined to comment on the individual case, which remains before the court, but said, quote, he condemns the general claim that vaccinations aren't safe, end quote. Quote, the science is in, and the medical experts' advice is absolute. Vaccination saves lives and protects lives, and they are an essential part of a healthy society, end quote, a spokesman for Mr. Hunt said. Quote, we have no time for false claims made by the anti-vaxxers, end quote. Because a judgment is yet to be handed down, it is unclear how seriously the court took Dr. Wileman's claims. To back her claims of expertise, Dr. Wileman lists a number of presentations and publications on the topic of immunisation, including a 2011 work in Medical Veritas. The website is run by Leonard G. Horowitz, who claims vaccinations lead to, quote, genocide, end quote, and that the Rockefeller Foundation is engaged in, quote, musical cult control through the Tunning Standard. Another presentation listed is an event Dr. Wileman herself organised as part of her Vaccination Decisions, an outfit which campaigns against the government's immunisation policies. Quote, I am qualified to write this report because I am an independent person with expertise in public health and the effects of toxins on the human body, end quote, she writes in a statement. Patrick Parkinson, the head of the University of Queensland's T.C. Birnie School of Law, said, quote, there is a very rigorous test of admissibility, end quote, in order for an expert witness to be given credit by the court. Quote, they must demonstrate they have expertise in the area, and they must demonstrate their views and recommendations are based upon that expertise, end quote, Professor Parkinson said. Quote, there will almost certainly be a challenge to the admissibility of this report as an expert one, and to her recommendations flow from an expert knowledge. This seems to be the law working properly, end quote. Lawyers acting for the mother of the children declined to comment, while attempts to contact lawyers acting for the father were unsuccessful. Dr. Wileman did not respond to multiple requests for comment. Professor McIntyre, who is now a senior doctor at the Westmead Children's Hospital, told Fairfax that Wollongong University, quote, must bear the major responsibility for manifestly inadequate supervision, end quote. Quote, it is clear from even cursory examination that Wileman's thesis, although raising some legitimate questions about gaps in both the process and transparency of immunisation policy development, is based on a highly selective and poorly informed review of the literature, driven by the imperative to support predetermined conclusions, end quote, he said. Quote, this is a cautionary tale, not just for Wollongong University, which continues to maintain that supervision and examination of the thesis was appropriate, despite strong contrary opinions from its own staff and prominent experts on immunisation, but for all Australian universities, end quote. The awarding of that PhD in early 2016 was harshly criticised by the peak clinical societies representing microbiology, virology, immunology and infectious diseases, as well as scientist Gustav Nossel. And that story comes to us from The Age, theage.com.au, with links in this week's show notes. And it's worth reminding you that in 2016, Julie Wileman, Brian Martin and the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Wollongong was awarded the Australian Skeptics Bent Spoon Award for awarding Wileman a doctorate on the basis of a PhD thesis riddled with errors, misstatements, poor and unsupported evidence, and conspiratorial thinking.
Dr. Harriet Hall, MD, known to thousands as the Skepdoc, a retired family physician and former Air Force flight surgeon. She writes about medicine, so-called complementary and alternative medicine, science, quackery, and critical thinking. Harriet now has a free course, a series of 10 video lectures on science-based medicine and alternative medicine. The videos and an accompanying course guide can be found by following the link at skepdoc.info or by visiting web.randy.org/educational-modules.html. Topics covered in the series are science-based medicine versus evidence-based medicine, what is CAM, chiropractic, acupuncture, homeopathy, naturopathy and herbal medicine, energy medicine, miscellaneous alternatives, pitfalls in research, and science-based medicine in the media and politics. Harriet covers each topic in a matter-of-fact, no-nonsense way that's sure to educate and entertain. Skepdoc.info.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Well, people, you might have heard about WIRES or seen about them or know someone who's had to ring them up and get help from them, but I've got two people from WIRES right now, and let us know what it stands for again.
Wildlife, Information, Rescue, Education Services.
And who have we got here?
I'm Deborah. I'm chairperson of the WIRES Northwest branch, looking after that part of Sydney.
And I'm Caroline, and I'm the bat coordinator for WIRES Northwest.
Actually, first question about bats. Yep. How do you get their poo off your car easily? Because they seem to have a very corrosive kind of poo.
Probably wash the car immediately when you get up in the morning.
Why is their poo so corrosive? Is it because they eat acidic fruit or something?
They do eat fruit and pollen, and it passes through the bodies really quickly, sort of thing. So it actually just basically goes straight through from the time that they eat.
Right, so it's like throwing a raw orange on your car, if that's what they're eating.
Yes. Yes.
And why did you get involved in WIRES?
I retired and was looking for things to do, and I've always... I grew up with a father who was a bird watcher and used to take us bush, and we learned to appreciate wildlife, and I wanted to do something for wildlife because I think humans are destroying habitat and wildlife is suffering.
That's for sure. And what attracted you to bats particularly?
I did the WIRES course, and I love all animals really, but with the bats they were talking about raising the baby bats and that you actually have to nurture and love them. And I thought I could do that easily. And so that's what actually attracted me to the bats in the first place. And once I actually started learning about bats and caring for bats, they're just the most amazing animals. They're intelligent, they're funny, they look after the young incredibly well. So that's flying foxes. You've got your microbats. They're also really intelligent. They're incredible how they actually survive and what they do to survive.
Because you only deal with Australian animals, yeah. So would a goat be counted?
No goats, no dogs, no cats. So.
Oh, right. Well, there's plenty of people that can deal with them anyway, isn't there?
Yeah. So just native wildlife.
So perhaps a large grey or red kangaroo might be something you had to deal with.
Yeah, we do get kangaroos in northwest Sydney, even in the suburbs. In fact, I think we've got waiting for a rescuer at the moment for a kangaroo who's on the side of the road. It's been hit by a car, and that's really sad. And we always go out and check kangaroos because there may be a joey in the pouch of a dead mother, so then we bring the joeys into care and look after them. And that's a really demanding job. It's sort of like 8 feeds a day for a very young joey, and they have to be toileted.
Do you have a high success rate? Because I imagine sometimes it would be difficult to bring them up.
Yeah, and they get stressed very easily, and then they get sick. So I have a huge admiration for our kangaroo carers. And they need to be in care for about 2 years before they're old enough to be released. So you need somebody with big acreage. So anybody out there who'd like to raise kangaroo joeys, do talk to your local wildlife organisation.
Remember, it's a lot of work. Remember, kangaroos just not for Christmas, I believe they say.
Yeah.
Now, people, I mean, I would look at a koala and go, I'm not going to pick that up. But people would make the mistake of thinking that a koala is something you can pick up. But that would be not the case.
No, I heard a talk about koalas, and they were saying koala claws are recurved. They kind of curve in, and they can kind of really grab you. I'd never done a koala rescue, but I was running a course in the country once, and a koala ran across the road in front of us, so of course we rushed after it to make sure it was okay. And luckily there was a koala rescue group nearby, and we rang them up, and they said if it's got a clean white bottom and it's bright and alert, then it's probably fine.
Right,
so we just ran up the nearest tree and we left it alone.
Right. So is the white bottom to show that it's clean and looking after itself? What does that mean?
Yeah. An unhealthy koala has yellow stains on its bottom because it has, like, diarrhea.
Right.
Yeah. So we learn all the time, and it's what I love about WIRES is every animal I rescue, I learn something new.
Oh.
So... Sorry, that's my phone.
That is cool. That's a ringtone, people. Listen to that. It's a magpie? That's very cool. Yeah. And where can people find you online and have a look at what you're all about?
wires.org.au is our website, and there's lots of useful information on the website, including how to become a WIRES volunteer and fact sheets about things like how to deal with possums and brush turkeys and swooping birds.
That was good. That's good. Yeah. I'm here with Dr Grace Thurtell. And what is your degree in, and where did you get it?
I got it at Sydney University, and I got it as a Bachelor of Veterinary Science. Now they've switched over to a DVM, so a postgraduate course now is how you do vet at Sydney Uni, but previously it was a bachelor's, so I did that in 2015 I graduated.
And what attracted you to that? Was it a love of animals, or you want to do the science involved? What was it that made you say, that's the one?
Yeah, bit of both, really. I've always loved animals, always had, pets as I grew up, and when I was in Year 10 I was doing school over in England, and as part of school they make you do work experience at wherever you would prefer, and I went to a vet clinic there and found that really interesting and thought, okay, well that's one way to work with animals, so let's explore that path a little bit more, and the science behind it, and treating animals is also really interesting as well, so it went down that path. And then once you work in general practice you get another idea of how it is and go, the behaviours.
Because like a doctor or a nurse, you see animals in distress all the time, so how do you deal with that as a vet?
Yeah, it's hard, and as vets we do also have to euthanize pets, when they're really sick or they're old, but it's always, some people struggle with it more than others, just like everyone. Your strengths in some areas differ, and at the end of the day you've got to remember you're doing the best for that patient, and ending suffering and poor welfare and quality of life as well. So you've always got to look at it that way, otherwise it can get hard, but you're trying to do the best for the animal and make them healthy and happy. So,
And Grace, even within your lifetime, and certainly within mine, the attitude to what amount of treatment should be given to a pet has changed. Like in the 70s, if you had to spend $200 on an animal, that would just be, you wouldn't even think about it. But now people do limb reconstructions, and is there dialysis for cats even? I mean, really expensive treatments. People can spend, I don't know, you would know how much it is, but like $8,000 or up on their cat. That would be unheard of before.
Yeah, definitely. The times have definitely changed with that, and I guess it's also that the pets are now, I guess, more really integrated parts of the family. They're a member of the family, so you want to do them as much as you can, and pet insurance definitely is worthwhile in case those sort of things happened and there is a $10,000 surgery or treatment required. So pet insurance, again, is a new thing to Australia as well. It was in England and America a lot earlier on and later to come to Australia, but it definitely helps with those sort of situations where it's going to be a big bill. But yeah, it definitely has changed over the years for sure.
But what's the strangest behaviour you've observed in a household pet?
Because
they do some weird stuff.
Yeah, there's so many. That's a very good question.
I know, because you get a lot there. But as well as that, you get pseudoscience in the area as well. You get people think that they can mind meld with the cat, or they can psychically read the cat and that kind of thing. And as in humans, there's probably no evidence of that, is there?
No. And being vets, we do go off the science and studying them.
That's probably a good idea.
Yeah. Try and keep it as close as we can to the science and help them as much as we can.
And where can we find you online and what you do online?
Yeah, so we're at Sydney Animal Behaviour Service in Seaforth, and we also consult out of Animal Referral Hospital in Homebush, and our website's www.sabs, so sydneyanimalbehaviourservice.com.au.
Dr Grace Thurtell there, who has such weird experiences with animals she can't bring them to mind. I don't blame you, because every day must be an adventure.
Yes, too many to count, really.
I'm here with Dr Matthew Bulbert, who, like myself, as I mentioned earlier, is a fan of the pygmy hippo, the only animal in nature that looks like it's wearing a skivvy.
That's true indeed. I love hippos. They're
What
fantastic.
about the oriental small-clawed otter that I like? You a fan of them too? They're great.
Yeah, of course they are. Well, anything that's actually unusual and strange, I'm in there.
Yeah. Well, the assassin bug, what's the go with that? Is it a native Australian thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Assassin bugs are found all over the world. So one of the things that people don't realise is that when they use the term bug, they think that's any kind of creepy crawly, but it's not actually true. So there's actually a particular group of insects that have mouth parts like a drinking straw, which they pierce into plants normally. But assassin bugs are exception to the rule because they're predators and they use that straw to pierce other animals.
Oh, that's not the bug that squirts water out. Is it that one? I've seen the bug that squirts water. That's fantastic.
No, not one of those. No, they're a little bit nastier than that.
Wow, okay. That is great. And look, have you had a great time here today? The one question that I thought really got everyone fired up was the wombat mange question. There was a lady who asked us what to do about a wombat that is around her area that has mange. And how do you do that? Because and you said whatever you do not chase wombat.
Yeah, that's right. That's correct. In fact, I've got a really nice story for that. The first wombat that I ever saw, I actually saw it on the track, and I got so excited that I actually wanted to take a photo of it, and then it moved off the track, and all I could think of was to chase it. And you know that? Wombats are incredibly fast. Oh, it left me in the dust.
So it just pinged off, really?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the straight line speed, they can do 30 kilometres an hour or something like that, some crazy thing like that. So there's no point trying to chase them in the first place. And then they have, they're just like solid muscle.
Right. So do they have claws for the digging that you don't want to be connected with?
Yeah, absolutely. So the claws, they're clawing through, making their burrows in really tough dirt. And then so they're actually... And wombats in general, they're just... Because they're full of muscle, they also have incredibly hard backsides as well. So their defensive strategy is that they if they're attacked, they actually stick their head into the burrow and they just put their butt out, and everything tries to attack it just can't do anything.
So if they've got mange, the advice was to go to the Wombat Specialist website and make a little device of some sort over there. Is it called a burrow? What is it called?
Yeah, burrow. Okay. Yeah, wombat burrow.
And so when it goes in and out, it just gets a bit of drip of whatever it is onto it, because is mange just sort of a yeast infection for the skin?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that's right. But it creates, you imagine if you've got an itch if you've had like chickenpox or something like that,
you're not happy.
It drives you insane. And it's the same with wombats. And it's a horrible thing to see. I mean, it can spread through their population as well. So, if you see it, you want to do something about it, whether it's contacting the local authorities and the local wildlife people to actually come down and do it, because they're amazing animals. And, this is the only country in the world you can see them.
Where can we find you online and what you do online?
Well, I'm based at Macquarie University, so you can look up my website, which I think is www.conflictecology.com, and you can find out about my research there. But otherwise, you can search my name.
Look, and I know you love all animals, but is there one animal you're a bit like, knock it off, enough already? Because I know you've got a favourite animal, the pygmy hippo sort of, but what's the one you go, look, could we have a bit less publicity for that? Is there one?
It's not very lot of publicity. The only one that I probably would struggle a little bit with are ticks. Just with ticks, it's because I know that they kind of burrow into it. It's not much they're burrowing into it. It's just that it's hard to imagine where they are sometimes in the bush. But I can still greatly appreciate how they manage to do what they do.
Now, what do they do? They help break things down. What's their part in the what's their reason for being in the ecosystem? Because to me, they just annoy cattle and us, and that's their job.
Yeah. Look, I can come up with something, but I just say they're completely annoying. That's their purpose.
Thank you, Dr. Matthew.
No worries. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Darren McKee, one of the hosts of The Reality Check. Each week, my co-host and I explore a range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. You can find us on iTunes, your favorite podcasting platform, and on Facebook by searching for The Reality Check, or by following us on Twitter at @TRC_podcast. Until then, keep an open mind, but not so open your brain falls out.
It's the Raw Skeptic Report with Heidi Robertson.
Byron Bay has become the anti-vaxxer's paradise by Jane Hansen in the dailytelegraph.com.au, September 23, 2018. Last week, my 13-year-old son had his second Gardasil, or HPV vaccine. He had this shocking side effect. He will now be protected from a series of cancers caused by the HPV virus, and he will not pass the virus on to others. The very same day, the Byron Shire Council overwhelmingly voted to continue to allow council-owned venues to be used by anti-vax groups to spread misinformation. We all know the Shire has the worst vaccination rates in the country. The green, rolling hills act like an echo chamber, and conspiracy theories are as common as gluten intolerances. It is no secret as to why it has the lowest vaccination rates. Anti-vaxxers have made an industry out of it. Natural therapists, organic food stores, doulas, wellness coaches, mothers groups, yoga tents, Instagram influencers, and even sections of the local media feed off each other, fermenting a bubbling broth of confirmation bias. Last year, Jing Organics, owned by Adam Kingsley, sponsored David Avocado Wolfe to come to Byron to spread his flat earth wisdom. Mr. Kingsley told the Sunday Telegraph he hoped Wolfe would spread his anti-vaccine message because he too was proudly anti-vaccine. The event sold out. While shockumentaries like Vaxxed get panned and canned by other publicly owned venues around Australia because they perpetuate myths that undermine a perfectly safe vaccination program, Byron, in the words of Greens Mayor Simon Richardson, welcomes the difficult conversations. Councillor Paul Spooner logically argued to Council that since the Australian Vaccination Skeptics Network, the original anti-vaccination network born in the Byron Shire in the 1990s, had a public health warning put out by the Healthcare Complaints Commission about its misinformation, Council should not be facilitating the AVN when it hires out council halls to air films like Vaxxed and Sacrificial Virgins. Spooner caught whooping cough from his own unvaccinated grandchild some years ago and was distressed by his and his grandson's experience. Quote, "It's just misinformation. We have the HCCC put out a warning about the AVN that's in play and the council turns its back on that," end quote, Spooner says. Local mum and member of the Northern Rivers vaccination supporters argued that council was, quote, "facilitating the AVN by providing venues for their dangerous views," end quote. The council voted 5-3 against the motion. The Birkenstock-wearing, hemp-swaddled, dreadlocked cliches cheered as alternative facts won out over actual science. In the gallery was Cecily Johnson, whose 7-year-old daughter Lane died of subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, SSPE, a rare but fatal complication of measles. She doesn't wish that sort of horror on anyone else, but feels it will happen again to a child whose parent made the decision not to vaccinate based on lies. At a recent airing of Sacrificial Virgins at the Mullumbimby Civic Hall, the AVN said it was, quote, "once again providing access to cutting-edge vaccination information and answers from acknowledged experts on vaccination science and policy," end quote. Just like Vaxxed, Sacrificial Virgins is all scary music, peppered with fringe-dwelling experts, jettisoned from the mainstream, usually for a very good reason. They claim the HPV vaccine is destroying the lives of young girls by causing a neurological condition that leads to paralysis. The main, quote, sacrificed virgin in the story is Ruby Shalom, who became paralysed 2 years. That's right, 2 years after she had her Gardasil vaccination. Clear-cut cause and effect right there in the minds of those looking to make a buck from scaring people. But here is what Sacrificial Virgins leaves out. Neurological conditions happen to teenage girls. They always have. And long before Gardasil came along. Large population studies have shown small numbers succumb to this strange affliction in the unvaccinated cohort, just as much as they do in the vaccinated. That is a big hole in the story. They even admit it in the opening scenes of the film, quote, "Nobody knows exactly why Ruby has developed this serious neurological damage after a healthy and active life," end quote, before proceeding to blame the HPV vaccine. It's not journalism, it's propaganda. And this is why the Byron Shire will remain the lowest vaccinated shire in the land. Many of the people who run the place are either anti-vax themselves or pandering to their conspiracy-loving voters while turning a blind eye to the fact the far north coast had 9 times the rate of whooping cough last year than the neighbouring health district. 2 babies have died from whooping cough in the region as a result of the lack of herd immunity. Barely a week goes by without schools sending a letter that yet another child has whooping cough. While David Avocado Wolf was having a cacao party in Mullumbimby last year, a 7-year-old deliberately unvaccinated kid from Nimbin was fighting for her life after getting tetanus, and a week later a baby suffered a brain hemorrhage after his mother turned down the vitamin K injection at birth. But hey, Byron likes to have difficult discussions. So how about discussing how misinformation, and tacitly endorsing the spread of it, is killing kids?
Hello, listeners of Maximum Fun. I want to tell you about our newest podcast that tells you all about the truth of the flat Earth.
Have you been looking out over the horizon and you've been thinking, wait a minute, this doesn't look round. I've been lied to my whole life.
What is NASA doing with $52 million a day?
Come on. We explode the myths.
Just kidding. We're Ono, Ross, and Carrie, and we investigate extraordinary claims.
That's right. We investigate extraordinary claims firsthand. We go undercover in fringe groups. We get alternative medicine treatments. And we hang out with people who have unusual beliefs, like flat earthers, 9/11 truthers.
We do ghost investigations. We've joined Scientology, and we got baptized in the Mormon Church.
If it goes bump in the night, then so do we. Why don't you check out Ono, Ross, and Carrie at MaximumFun.org?
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Coming up next week, more of Maynard talking to the animal experts. In fact, his segment will be devoted to his discussions about cats, cat behaviour. Really interesting. If you're a cat owner, you will really want to hear this interview about cat behaviour and what you should and shouldn't do. I certainly learnt a lot with my 2 cats. Where are they? Waiting outside the door. Talking about cat behaviour, Maud, the smaller of the 2, Henrietta and Maud's the smaller, has a wonderfully fun habit, normally fun, of chasing her toy mouse and then bringing it back and plonking it at your feet, waiting, meowing, until you throw it down the stairs. She comes back, plonks it at your feet, meows, and on and on and on. While Henrietta has the habit of putting her paws up on the desk and nudging you, or me, while I'm trying to use the mouse. So sometimes I end up clicking on things I never meant to. Not long now before the Skepticon here in Sydney, and to those people who live around the world who can't make it, we'll be doing our best, certainly Maynard will, to be recording reports and interviews to play in the weeks following the convention. I noticed that the Australian dollar is even lower, going down against the greenback and other major currencies, which may be a good excuse for you to chip into the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal at skepticzone.tv, because your dollar goes further, or your pound, or your yen, or whatever the case may be. Krona? I wonder if there's a song about all the world's currencies. And I think there's another afterthought somewhere along the way. But anyway, for now, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation. Hello, people who listen after the music. I'm at the Cafe Madame Frou Frou with Kruna. Hello.
Hi.
You're going to help me play the dice game.
Dice game?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, I've got a insider die there. I'm going to roll it 3 times, and we have to guess what the number's going to come up. Well, you can roll it for everybody, actually. There you are. So give it a shake in your hand. Now, everybody at home and in your car or walking the dog, it's a number from 1 to 10, and roll the dice.
Here we go.
And the number is?
Number 9.
Number 9. That's the first number. So everybody, use your powers. And here we go. Next number is?
Lucky number 5.
Number 5. 9, 5, and last one.
And 5 again.
955.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.